for our readers, we're really trying to identify as much as we can, hey, this is something you should know about. We talk a lot about how a full-blown trend is not as interesting to us as a potential trend, something that's sort of starting to bubble at the surface. Because once it's already become a full-blown trend, it's a trend for a reason. Everybody knows about it, right?
Right.
For us, we want to be able to say, look, this could be happening. You may actually be able to head this off at the pass now if you can get in front of it. If you can't, then at the very least, you can be prepared for when the storm comes. And hey, if the storm never comes, then great.
Hi, everyone. Here we are at On Record PR, and we're coming to you from Legal Week in New York City. And I have Zack Needles with us from ALM. So, Zack, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everyone about what you do at ALM?
Sure. So I am the editor-in-chief, litigation and law.com. So I oversee the brand law.com, which is our overarching brand that encompasses all of our other legal brands. On top of that, I also oversee the litigation reporting team, so the editorial team. So all of our reporting that we do that has to do with court cases, judges, any type of litigation, I oversee that. So yeah, that's what I'm up to.
So what got you into journalism in the first place?
It was just something that I felt like I was good at. So I figured I might as well go with what I know. I could write. I didn't really catch the journalism bug per se, where, in terms of like investigative work and things like that, until I started working at the Legal Intelligencer, which is one of our brands, in 2008. And that's when I really got into the actual journalism aspect of it. But I knew that I could write. So
2008. I've known you that long.
Yeah, that long. I think you were the first person that my boss, Hank Greslak, who now works with you, introduced me to. So that's pretty crazy that you were like my first contact when I became a reporter.
Oh, that's fantastic. I've been doing this a long time. And one of the things I love for our listeners to hear is the journalism perspective, the reporter perspective, the editor perspective. As I'm sure you can guess, there's pressures on the in-house PR teams and the comms teams, and for those of us who support those teams. So I'm going to ask you some fun questions and some more gritty questions.
Sure.
But what do you enjoy most when it comes to being shared a story? What do you really want to dig in on?
What I really love is when somebody identifies a new problem that they're facing, something that we haven't heard about before, or a new angle to a new problem, something that we can honestly try to help them solve by kind of group sourcing it and talking to other lawyers or legal professionals who do something similar to what that person does, and try to figure out, okay, how are they approaching this issue? And that's what I really, over the years, there's been a ton of different things that I've written about over the years. I've really gravitated toward the thought leadership aspect of what we do. And a lot of that is problem solving. So that's what I like. When someone comes to us and says, this is a new issue that we're facing, or maybe a new opportunity too. It doesn't always have to be negative. Something new that it's like, wow, I didn't realize that was a thing. Now we know it is, and we want to go out and explore it.
And what are some, besides that, on the litigation side? So if you're making a decision with your team and you're trying to decide, okay, we've got these 3 pieces of litigation, but we only have room for one in terms of time today, because we're not really talking about print anymore.
Right, exactly.
Room is a little bit different. It's more about bandwidth.
Right, exactly. Well, so that's a great question. That's something that we talk about all the time. Back in the day, if it had an interesting set of facts, if it was a case with an interesting set of facts, maybe something kind of unique and interesting and funny, we'd say, okay, that people want to read about that. That doesn't really cut it for us anymore. What we want is something that's going to be impactful to the entire ecosystem, or at least some segment of the ecosystem. And what that means is, if it's a case being filed, we want it to be something that potentially portends some kind of a trend that could happen, that people other than the people who are directly involved in that one case are going to care about for some reason, or should know about. When you're horizon scanning and you're thinking like, oh boy, here's 1 or 2 of these cases, we're going to see a ton more. The example that I always use with my team is the business interruption litigation that came out of COVID-19. If we had been fortunate enough to just see the very first one of those cases, that would have been a very easy one for us to extrapolate and say, okay, we are going to see tens of thousands of these cases because they're highly replicable. They're based on insurance policy language, which tends to be boilerplate in a lot of cases. So there's going to be a million companies that are dealing with the same exact issue. And that's a pretty extreme example, but we're looking for things like that. It has to have some kind of broader ripple effect. So if you've got 3 cases, 2 of them are kind of factually interesting, but don't have a whole lot of broader impact. And then you have a third one that does have some kind of broader impact. We're going with that third one every time.
Fair enough. So you used a term of art that we've heard a lot, in fact, here at Legal Week, called horizon scanning.
Yes.
And I don't really think all of our listeners are going to know what that means.
Sure.
So can you explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. So what we hear from outside counsel all the time is that they're being called upon by their clients, and certainly the in-house legal departments too, by the companies that they work for. It's not enough to just solve the problems that are in front of us. It's also what problems are potentially coming down around the bend, down the pike, however you want to say it. But you're looking out at the horizon and you're trying to figure out what opportunities are out there that maybe not everyone knows about yet, and what potential challenges are coming. And you want to try to mitigate those risks as much as you can, or at least be prepared for the possibility or maybe the inevitability that they're going to happen. So a lot of that is, look, some negative thing that you may think is coming may never come to fruition, but it's better safe than sorry.
Right.
And we take that same approach in what we do for our readers. We're really trying to identify as much as we can, hey, this is something you should know about. We talk a lot about how a full-blown trend is not as interesting to us as a potential trend, something that's sort of starting to bubble at the surface. Because once it's already become a full-blown trend, it's a trend for a reason. Everybody knows about it, right?
Right.
For us, we want to be able to say, look, this could be happening. You may actually be able to head this off at the pass now if you can get in front of it. If you can't, then at the very least, you can be prepared for when the storm comes. And hey, if the storm never comes, then great, So,
I want to take that one step further. A big part of the conversation here at Legal Week has been about generative AI.
Yes.
And, I was one of the speakers on the workshop in the first day. And, a year ago, we were having these same conversations, but it was like, holy Hannah, there's this new, not so new thing out called Gen AI, but it's proliferated and it's exploded. And one of the things that Patrick Fuller talked about this morning in the State of the Industry was using generative AI for horizon scanning.
Yes.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what that means and how, because I think that was a really big deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And clients are going to be expecting law firms to be doing this.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. And I definitely don't profess to be an expert, although I will tell you, we've been podcasting ourselves the entire time we've been here. I think we've gotten through about 20, I want to say like maybe 20 of the 23 podcasts that we have set up, and every single person has wanted to talk about generative AI. And it's been really interesting because last year, like you said, people didn't really know what it was. They were excited about it as the year went on. Then they were afraid of it because there were these horror stories about hallucinations and case citations of cases that didn't exist and all that stuff. Now we're really in a spot where we're talking about the actual application of it. People are really getting down to brass tacks about this is how you can use it now. So I say all that to first just preface by saying that, like, yes, clients want law firms to use this. Things that make law firms more efficient are always sometimes hard to sell to law firms, but clients want them to use this. Now, in terms of using it for horizon scanning, I don't know. I have to confess, I don't know the ins and outs of how exactly that would work. But what I can tell you from everybody that I've been talking to, it's that the best application of generative AI is if you have a data set that is airtight, right? So it's not the open internet. There's not all this possible noise coming in. If you have a data set that is airtight, you can really save a lot of time and do a lot more analysis than a human being could do in any reasonable length of time with AI, and figuring out, modeling all of these different possible risk scenarios, let's say. So you can go through all the cases, let's say, that you've had over 20 years, figure out, how did those cases come out? how might those cases come out in the future? How did this court rule in X type of case for however length of time? What did we argue in these cases and how many times was that successful? That kind of thing. And I think that's really what AI can be used for, is if you know that you have a clean data set and you're not going to be getting a lot of hallucinations, as they call them, then you can really start modeling potential scenarios and kind of walking through the paces and seeing like, here's where we are likely to end up. And I mean, that's really what we're talking about with horizon scanning in general, is what might happen, how do we get there, or how do we go in a different direction, right? And an AI can do that however many times you want at the speed of light compared to what associates could do.
It's really no different than what I do at Furia Rubel when it comes to crisis communications and planning and incident response planning and risk management. And, risk management it's a big part of litigation, but it's a big part of looking at what could be happening coming down the road. So it's not just for law firms and corporations, but from a litigation perspective, but horizon scanning is scenario planning.
Absolutely.
I mean, and so it's so interesting. I mean, the language is changing, and I think why I bring it back there is because for those who are not comfortable with change, it's not really change.
No, it's not. It's not.
We're looking at the same maps. We're just taking different directions.
Definitely.
Perhaps we're putting more refined gas in the car,
right? Yeah,
those types of things. But it's not new. And I think that's really what I want our listeners to understand, that these technologies, while they may be changing the way we practice law, they are not changing the value of the services that we're delivering.
Absolutely not. That's been another huge takeaway from all these conversations I've been having here. It's that it's a tool. Several different companies have said to us, look, we called it an AI assistant for a reason, because it's supposed to assist you in doing what you do best as a lawyer. It's not supposed to replace you. And I think people are very sensitive to that idea. But it's exactly what you said. We're not looking to do anything new. We're just looking at the tools that can help us do it more efficiently, faster, with better accuracy. So, I mean, I think everybody is very mindful of that these are new tools to do something that lawyers have always wanted to do, and hopefully to free them up to do even more of what they're good at, which is actually analyzing the data, figuring out how best to apply it to each client and that client's industry, rather than spending a lot of time doing research.
I love it. And, this is one of my favorite conferences. I try to be here every year because there's so much to learn and so many brilliant people. However, our listening audience is going to be listening for a long time. And you've been in legal reporting and journalism for quite some time now. Let's take a break for a message from our sponsor.
This episode is brought to you by Furia Rubel Communications, a public relations and marketing agency serving law firms and businesses internationally. With an expert team of professionals positioned throughout the U.S. and supported by international affiliates, Furia Rubel enhances its clients' brands through integrated communications by providing expert guidance in crisis management and high-profile litigation, protecting brand and reputation, and supporting internal marketing teams with media relations, media and crisis training, and client and talent acquisition and retention. To learn more, visit furiarubel.com.
All right, we're back with Zack Needles. And what is that one thing or a few things that really kind of gets under your skin when it comes to being pitch stories?
Sure. So I was talking earlier about how we're really looking for not just what happened, but what it means, or what might happen, but also what it means and why people other than the folks who are specifically involved in that matter or that situation would care about. So pitches that come to us without any context, I would say, without the proper context, I think the best way to pitch us, especially because of our focus on how we like to report on things, is to say, like, look, this is what this means. This is why your readers should care. This is why you guys should care about it. We really need that. What we found in our own work is that if we don't explain to our readers why they should care, they're just going to keep scrolling by, because there's so much noise out there. There's so much competition. They're getting so much information from so many different sources that if we don't give them a reason to stop and say, if I don't read this, then I'm going to be at a competitive disadvantage, then they're not going to stop because they've got too much else going on. And so I think if you want to cut through the noise as a PR person, interacting with the media, you have to provide some of that context too. Not that you have to write the whole story for us, but if you can say like, okay, my client won this case. Great for my client. We all understand that the client wants the news out there that they won. But we're going to be much more interested if you can explain why that victory is important for the broader set of that litigation, of those types of cases, or what can other companies who are in a similar situation learn from that process. So, I get it. Like, I know that people sometimes have to pitch things that they're being pressured to pitch, and that's fine. I don't hold it against anybody, but I think that's a great thing to keep in mind. Easier said than done sometimes with depending on what the news is. But I think a lot of times if you can explain to us why we should care and our readers should care, we're going to definitely take a second look at that for sure.
So on top of like those two things, what one piece of advice would you give to what's coming down the pike as it relates to communicating with the media and stories and ideas and things like that?
I mean, I think that it depends on the media outlet. For us, the context is so important. For others, not just in the legal space, in any space, there are some organizations that just want every piece of news they can get their hands on. It's a volume business, and that whatever you pitch them, they're going to put it up there. They're going to find a way. For us, it really is about why should somebody, especially, look, we're a subscription model. So if somebody's paying for this, why should they be paying for this and continue to pay for this? Why should they, what are they getting from this information that's helping them do a better job, or advance their career or win their case or make more money or seal that deal, whatever it might be. That's what we're looking for. So I would say, like, coming down the pike, I have to imagine more organizations are going to be looking at that because, like I said, there's a million places that you can get the news from. Even as a lawyer, even if you practice in this very niche practice, there's probably at least 3 or 4 alerts and newsletters that you can get that are going to tell you about the most recent cases. What you need is somebody to explain to you, this case matters, this case doesn't matter, this case is unique in some way. And like, that's what we try to do. So the more the person pitching that content can help us with that, I mean, I think that's really key. And like I said, I have to imagine that there's other organizations that are going to feel that way too. So
let's have a little bit of fun.
Okay.
When is your next flash mob in Grand Central Station?
Well, I'm scheduled to leave today, so I might have to get one going before I hop on the train.
So for those listeners, there was a flash mob here at Legal Week, and Zack was doing the morning minute with his colleague,
Elena Lancaster.
Elena.
And Charles Garner, I should give him a shout out. He's the producer and he wrote that script. So
they did a little piece of Zack being in the flash mob, and it was just great entertainment and a lot of fun. So I want to commend you for, bringing the personality to all of it and really just kind of having fun with things and lightening it, because there's so many big conversations happening here.
Yeah.
A lot of which are, way above my head.
Same.
Some of the real technical conversations happening, but it's been a lot of fun.
We have an absolutely amazing newsroom, and everybody is rowing in the same direction in terms of what I was just saying. That's really our vision, is to make sure that it's not just the news, but it's the context on top of the news that helps you. News you can use, I guess it's the cliche, but it's how do you take that news and actually apply it to your career or to your business? So,
I am grateful for your time today. We wish you well. You'll be hearing from me.
Absolutely.
So listeners, if you have questions, send them to podcast@furiarubel.com and we'll be sure to get them answered. Have a great day.
Thanks.
On Record PR is produced by Jennifer Simpson-Carr and Matt Henderson, with support from the team at Furia Rubel Communications. This episode is edited by Željko Tomic of Compost Media Flow.